Yo, what up? This is Josh Rubin from East West Selling and Performance, and today I want to talk about or understand why we don't sweat. You know, we have all these people that say, when I work out or do Bikram, I don't sweat. I do exercise, I don't sweat. Well, for us, that's a huge indicator that at the cell level, this person is actually hypometabolic or hypothyroid. Now, I can't diagnose and say you're hypothyroid. Of course, you're on your way to being hypothyroid. And what is the mechanism behind this? Now, I haven't found too much out there, so I'm really going off my understanding of physiology, one of my correspondences with Ray Pete, and understanding the basics behind T4 and T3. So if we look at that, we look at T4. Let's look at some thyroid hormones first. So the thyroid itself actually produces 4 hormones. T4, T3, it actually produces reverse T3, and according to some texts, it actually produces T2. Now, we're only going to talk about really 2 of them, T4 and T3. T4 is actually considered a pre-hormone. And I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. It does very little until it's activated within the cells. Now, T4 is synthesized from the amino acid tyrosine and iodine and converted to T3 or reverse T3. We don't recommend you supplement with iodine or you supplement with tyrosine. Just like iron is actually used in your cells, we don't recommend, unless someone really needs it, to supplement with iron. That's the mainstream school of thought. Well, if you take iodine, you take tyrosine, that's going to increase thyroid hormone production. It's not that simple, unfortunately. T4 accounts for 95% of the circulating thyroid that's measured in your blood or your serum, while T3 makes up the rest, along with small amounts of reverse T3 and T2. T4 is stored in the follicle gland and is released in the bloodstream, bound to thyroid-binding globulin, which estrogen and unsaturated fats have a huge impact on, as well as other things like halogens, mercury, things like that. It's also bound to thyroid-binding globulin, as I mentioned, and albumin, which estrogen has a huge impact on by lowering albumin levels. And calcium in your serum is actually attached to albumin. So this is how estrogen, or being hypothyroid, can affect not only blood volume, but cause swelling, edema, and lower calcium levels. About 0.03 to 0.05% of circulating T4 is actually unbound. Certain deficiencies in zinc, copper, vitamin A, B2, B6, and vitamin C will cause the decrease in the production of T4. These are all actually needed for the production of T4. Let's look at T3. T3 speeds up metabolism. Now, a lot of doctors think because you're deficient in T3, or you have high TSH, that's all they look at, that you're hypothyroid. It's not the best indicator. You have to get a full thyroid panel done, TSH, T3, T4, free T3, 4T4, TPO, etc., etc. You can't just look at one thing. But they think because you have low T3 or high TSH that if we just give you T4, you're actually going to be of benefit. Well, there's many implications or many problems with actually taking T4 by itself. But T3 speeds up metabolism. It revs up the engine. It's the most metabolically active thyroid hormone, being 4 to 5 times more metabolically active than T4. A majority is bound to thyroid-binding globulin, and less than 1% of T3 is actually free. T3 is also bound to albumin and is taken up by the liver. So albumin plays a major role not only in blood volume, but actually in the liver. The systemic effects and half-life of T3 are actually shorter. And although some T3 is produced in the thyroid, approximately, depending on who you read, 70 to 80%, 80 to 85% is actually produced outside the thyroid, primarily by conversion of T4 in the liver and in the kidneys. Within the liver and the kidneys, the enzyme that's responsible for this peripheral conversion of T3 is actually selenium, and the enzyme is actually called 5'-deodoninase. The availability of glucose in the liver cells, the storage of glycogen, which estrogen wastes glycogen, as well as if we're not taking in the right foods and the right frequencies, we're not going to have enough glucose or enough glycogen storage, which stimulates gluconeogenesis and the production of cortisol, which inhibits thyroid hormone production, among other things. Breaks down bone. It's catabolic. So the availability of glucose in the liver cells is regulated by the 5-deodoninase enzyme, converting T4 to T3. Type 1 deodoninase is sensitive to the lack of glucose in the cell. A lack of glucose shuts down the production of T3 and increases the production of reverse T3. So you can see that, number one, your we should say peripheral conversion is dependent on selenium, but it's also dependent on glucose. Now, I'm not saying go eat pasta, Cheerios, and Fruit Loops. I'm saying eat foods like tropical fruits and root vegetables that have sucrose in them, that have some fructose, which balances out the insulin-stimulating factors of glucose, in order to get sugar into the cell to upregulate energy metabolism, to regulate oxidative energy production, to increase carbon dioxide production. But the simplistic of what I just said is sugar actually, or I should say thyroid, the peripheral conversion of thyroid hormone is actually dependent not only on selenium, but it's actually dependent on glucose. Now, why don't I sweat? Well, let me get my little thing here that I just kind of typed up. And you see this a lot with women when they have night sweats. The doctors will put them on estrogen. And they say, well, my night sweat stopped. Obviously, estrogen's beneficial. So what's going on? What's the mechanism behind this? Well, we know that estrogen, we need it in our bodies. It's there for a reason. It's when we can't detoxify it, we produce it in excess, or we have deficiencies, let's say, in progesterone or pregnenolone, and it's unopposed. That's when it can actually become very harmful. Create hypoxia at the cell level. Waste glucose. Things like that. But from what I've researched, and what I think about people not sweating is this. It's from low peripheral conversion of T4 to T3 hormone. It could be many things. It could be excess cortisol production. It could be blood sugar handling issues, not detoxifying estrogen. All these things inhibit T4 to T3 conversion. It could be mercury. It could be halogens. It could be dioxins. It could be many things in your environment. For us, of course, we look at food. So people not getting, being overweight, the estrogen is stored and produced in fat cells. If you're not regulating blood sugar, estrogen is going to go up. If you're not eating the right proteins, your liver needs protein to detoxify estrogen. All these things affect the peripheral conversion of T3. T3 is metabolically active. It's the most metabolically active thyroid hormone. It revs the engine. That's why when you eat according to our philosophy, over time, your temps and pulse go up. You're revving the engine. You're turning things on. You're causing the hands and feet not to be cold anymore because you're down-regulating adrenaline and you're getting blood flow to the extremities. So you're actually turning on the engine and creating warmth throughout the body. So when you don't have any engine, you don't have any warmth. So most hypothyroid or hypometabolic people have low body heat. They essentially have low body temperature and pulse. Now, the body sweats a lot of the times for protection, to actually cool itself down. Now, hypothyroid people, internally, because a lot of this has to do with estrogen inhibiting T4 to T3 conversion and wasting glycogen, downregulating T3 conversion, and upregulating cortisol and adrenaline, which gives you kind of that cold effect. Hypothyroid people are typically already in this state. They're already metabolically at the cell level cold. You can take your body in temp in bed when you get up in the morning. You'll see if you're below 97.8, then you're actually in this kind of cold hypometabolic hypothyroid state. So if the body's already cold, you don't need to cool itself down anymore for protection because it's already cold. You have low body temperature pulse. You're not producing energy at the cell level. Now, as I mentioned, estrogen plays a huge role in this because over time, it shuts the system down even more and more. This is really what I got from Ray. Don't know if it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to me, but from a physiological perspective, I'm trying to find more information on it. But estrogen is an excitatory hormone, in excess. Part of our philosophy is to downregulate or inhibit a lot of these excitatory hormones and facilitate a lot of the hormones that are inhibitory or protective. So estrogen is excitatory. So if you push yourself deeper into this hole, you take hormone medications, you're not sweating, you actually push your body from this excited state even more into excited state. It's almost like, the straw that broke the camel's back. So if you're estrogen dominant, you're not sweating, you take HRT for night sweats, and you stop sweating, it stops them. But what's really going on is you're pushing your body, you're pushing your cells, your physiology, and your endocrine system over the deep end. And that's why you stop sweating. You're actually taking your hypometabolic state, the low body temperature and pulse, the excess estrogen, the lack of conversion of T4 to T3, and you're actually pushing yourself deeper, which is getting rid of the night sweats. So you're actually making things worse. So all in all, it really comes down to, am I producing energy at the cell level? Am I revving the engine by producing T3? And if I'm not, that's why a lot of people don't sweat. Now, of course, in some cases, people actually do sweat in their hypothyroid, but I work with a lot of women, and it's common in women more than men, that don't sweat when they exercise, or take estrogen, the birth control pill, to get rid of night sweats. And the whole mechanism has to do with that hormone even further wasting glycogen and decreasing the peripheral conversion of T3, which kind of freezes the engine and puts you deeper into a hypometabolic state. So hopefully you've enjoyed this YouTube clip. What should you do? Check this out.